So you want to be in a relationship when you're going through this sort of journey of self-discovery and moving away from becoming anxiously attached. But at the same time, it is an endeavor that you need to do for yourself, isn't it? It's something, you know, when couples, for example, are going through a difficulty, say one person is anxiously attached, it's more often than not about them working out their problems as a couple, but about going back into your own individual problems. It's about working on the individual, starting with yourself.
Actually, it's both.
Okay.
So, you know, there's a mirroring that goes on. I offered this book for people who don't maybe have partners who are willing, but there's actually a big part of the book for people who have partners who are more avoidant, and a path for both of them. But I wrote this book so that anybody, no matter where you are in your relationship status, you can start your own work right now based on your past experience. And if you're anxious, you're having that show up in your world anyway. Even if it's not in a romantic partner, it is still going to show up. Your patterns will show up with close people. But if you work on yourself, it will be mirrored. That mirroring happens. So the work, and we can talk about the actual work, but the work is deepening within yourself and building the self-compassion and new awareness. And when you do that, you actually start to build compassion and awareness for the people you're deeply connected to. So it's not really one or the other, it's actually both, and being in the moment about what's showing up for you right now and putting the flashlight in. But when you put that flashlight in and you heal, you often have a new understanding of who you're relating to as well. So it's beautiful in the mirroring, and that you can be in any part of the process and use your past experiences if you're not in a romantic relationship to start to do the work. But you can also be in a turbulent relationship right now and use the book to work on yourself, or invite your partner in on the book, because I talk about the anxious avoidant dance and I give some, you know, a path for that dynamic as well. It's really not one or the other.
So what does it mean? Perhaps you could explain, because one of the most important things that you talk about is being self-full. So as you say, you work together, but essentially you need to become self-full. Could you explain that?
Yes, that's a many topic, and it's really about the whole book is about becoming self-full. But I can start at the beginning when I started to work with codependency, and I would tell people you need to be more selfish. And they would look at me like I had 20 heads. That's not a word that they could digest. Selfish, what are you talking about? And then I started to say self-full, like you have to learn how to fill your own cup up first. And all my slightly codependent was like, I can hear that. And I could start to take care of myself, and I can pull back. And you know, this goes into boundaries and all that. But I find the adaptive strategy of a selfless person is someone who grew up in a home where they learned to do and give themselves away. They essentially self-abandoned themselves. And there's nothing wrong with this. This is how they adapted. So they find themselves in a relationship overextending their energy, sometimes completely drained, trying too hard. They didn't learn how to receive. They don't have a fluid exchange there. Sometimes they attract what they think is a selfish person, right? And so there's a person that's really good at receiving, or maybe really aware of themselves and doesn't have a ton of empathy, or we perceive it that way. There's a self-full place in the middle, and that's a place of learning I can meet my own needs, and I can still meet the needs of my partner, and where there's safety in that. And selfless, self-full, and selfish are states of being. And we move in and out of these states. And we usually, if we're scared, will lean to a state. Selfless and selfish are both born of the sympathetic nervous system. They're actually both states of survival. They're both states of doing. One is taking care of themselves too much and not really tuning in to the relationship. And the other one is over tuning to the relationship and abandoning themselves. But they're both born of survival stances. So the work in becoming self-full is essentially expanding your window of tolerance, for those people who understand interpersonal neurobiology, but being more and more with yourself, more and more with your sensational experience, healing more and more of yourself so that you are aware of when your body is feeling safe in connection. And when you shift into a state of sympathetic activation, either selfish or selfless, you come back to a state of self-full faster. Your sense of getting back to homeostasis becomes faster and faster. And that's how you know you're healing. It's not that we don't shift into these states. We do all the time, but we're not always aware. Oh my God, I'm in a selfless state. I'm giving and giving. Fear is running the show here, and this makes perfect sense. I'm feeling disconnected, I'm feeling scared, starting to become aware, and then shifting back into meeting what is and getting yourself back into a sense of safety, whatever that means for you. There are many different ways in doing that, and starting to recognize these states that we all live in, and which one do you tend to go to when you're in a relationship? Where is your default, and how can we get you more in the self-full place or back into the self-full place faster? Sometimes you can get activated for 4 days, but as you start to do the work, maybe that becomes 2 days or 1 day, but you become more and more aware that I'm getting myself back into a place of safety, which is really the self-full place, which is a fluid place of, I can get really close and become intimate, but I can also handle space from my partner. I can ask for my needs. I can negotiate. We can have conflict. Conflict isn't scary. Self-full is a ventral state of connection, and that we have these states of being, and an anxious person usually expands their energy and out of fear runs towards connection or tries to reestablish connection. And if that doesn't happen, they run the other direction. And an avoidant person usually shuts down their energy and distances themselves. So they'll, that can look selfish on the other end. And they're both states of protection. And so once we start to understand this, we can start to do the work to get more and more access to a self-full state, which is really a ventral state of connection and safety in our body. And a lot of this work is about understanding your own nervous system and your own body and what's really happening in these dynamics with the people you care about.
Right. And I think what's so important about what you've just been saying, and just generally what people should take away from the book, is that yes, it began, at a very young age. Yes, it was in childhood, but it's not too late. You aren't an anxiously attached person or an avoidant person, and that's it. And you only go through your life as that. I mean, we're learning a lot about neuroplasticity, about how much we are changeable, and things that we used to think were set in stone that we can change ourselves. So that's really importantly, isn't it? It's not too late to work on yourself and make yourself not an anxiously attached person.
Yeah, and that's such a great point. I mean, due to neuroplasticity, we build new wiring, and that's a lot of what we're trying to do in the book and explain what that is. I think the best way for me to explain it is that if you lived across the street and it was snowing outside, and anxiety was my protector, because that's what it was, I might take one path from my house to yours. It's a well-worn path. I know this path. The snow is gone. As I start to heal, there becomes new pathways that I develop to your house. The pathways aren't as well worn, but they're new possibilities. And the more work I do, the more choices I have. And those pathways are literally the new neuroplasticity building in my brain. On a really bad day, if I'm really triggered or awakened, I like to say, I might go down the path of least resistance because it's so impulsive. But if I start to do the work on a good day, I might notice there are several different options in the heat of the moment. And there are other paths here. And that's actually like your brain rewiring. And we as humans are always going to reach out for warm, nurturing connection. And our brains do change. And in the right environments and with the right help and support, we can build these new neural wires or new neuro connections. It's also important for me to say that, like, my book is a label, and I think labels are important, but these are really embedded patterns, and you can have more than one embedded pattern. And attachment is a combination of two people's embedded patterns and what lives in the relational space. So you could show up anxious with your boyfriend and avoidant with a girlfriend because of their combined patterns with you. Usually we have a hallmark. Usually we have one way in which is our default, like I said, selfless or whatever that is. But to say that we're anxious in everything, or that we don't have what I call avoidant protectors, which I can talk about, it's wonderful to have these labels, but it's a much more layered, complicated thing when you start to understand the neurobiology, because there's just so many factors that come in. So we have these patterns, and it's good to have the labels because there is help and you can change them. And it's not as simple as just a label. You know, it's really starting to understand the embedded pattern in your nervous system and how you're relating and when those patterns show up and with whom.
That's something that I was wondering about. These two ways of showing up are polar opposites. And surely if you don't come in with that label, you can end up in a sort of, it causes a seesaw, because if one person starts to be a bit more on the anxiously attached side, the other person sort of automatically in relationships goes to the avoidance side. That's just, so you could come in a kind of good space, level-headed and secure, but it happens so much in relationships that a small amount of anxiety from one person and neediness produces an avoidance in the other, whether or not they had those labels already.
Yeah, well, every relationship does a dance. And so
Right,
someone who's more
dancing. I'm doing the dance with my fist.
And it's our job to get conscious of what's going on. And someone who's more secure isn't going to pull away as much as someone who's more avoidant. And so what happens sometimes, which is really important to understand, is that let's say I'm anxious and I'm going through something and I'm really scared. My system is in a sympathetic arousal and I'm scared and I'm running towards my partner to fix that. Unconsciously, my partner through neuroception is picking up fear that I'm signaling out to him. And so his system goes into fear. We're connected. And if his way to regulate his system is to pull away and go for a jog or whatever he does to calm his system down, I'm going to read that as abandonment because my system needs connection in that moment. So what you have is two systems in a fear state doing what they need. Mine needs a lot of connection, but from a fearful place, not from a connected place, from a place of needing connection. His system needs to calm down. And the only way he can calm down is to pull away and kind of self-regulate. So I need co-regulation for repair, and he pulls down and he needs self-regulation. And sometimes the person we want most to show up for us isn't capable because their system is also in fear. And so we're not even aware that that happens. In the book, I talk about anxious people as octopus. And I love the octopus. I don't know if anyone listened to watch The Octopus Teacher, but energy expands. So it's like, we're going to reach out. We're going to want to fix. We're going to want to get back into connection immediately because we don't want abandonment and we don't want anxiety around it not feeling okay. The other person can be more like a turtle. So they kind of go into their shell when they get scared. The problem is these fear states perpetuate each other. So the more the octopus expands, the more the turtle goes in. And it's not the octopus or the turtle who starts it. The turtle can shut in and the octopus can expand. And they're all happening in the automatic nervous system. We can't even control it happening. It's so automatic. So my system is signaling fear to another system. And, that system is then going into fear, and the way in which that other person is coping is causing more fear on this side. And then we're both in fear states and we can't get back into connection unless we start to understand this and we stop blaming each other for the type of states that we're in. And we start to see these a little bit more clearly and have communication around it. Even if he can't show up, he can say, I'm being activated right now and I want to show up for you, but now I need to go for a run because my system's so activated. And and we can have these conversations, but we can't stop the automatic nervous system from responding. We just become more and more aware. And with the neuroplasticity and the work, we do have other options of self-regulating and other tools, or co-regulating with someone else, or working with our breath, because our breath actually can trick our brain that we're actually safe. Our respiratory system is the only system we have control over when our automatic nervous system is in a survival mode. But understanding this on a deep level does shed compassion if you're stuck in this dance for your partner, and could open up a pathway for all your relationships to start to see that we're all sometimes stuck in these survival states, and how we respond to them can feel like it hurts, and it does hurt, but it's also not, it's automatic. Sometimes people aren't intentionally trying to abandon you or hurt you in that moment. They literally physically can't show up because of what's coming up in their system.